Hello and welcome to Wisconsin in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is Benjamin Yount, the Center Square's Wisconsin correspondent. How are you, Ben?
It is getting dangerously close to Halloween, and I have zero Halloween decorations. Now, I've bought plenty of Halloween candy, but that didn't make it. I'm more concerned about the decorations at this point.
That's why I always wait until the last possible moment to buy Halloween candy, because if I buy it weeks in advance, I'm going to eat it, and I'm only going to have to go out and buy more.
This is what they do. They put it out, and you know, Sam's Club and Costco have the giant bags, and oh, it's such a good deal. And then next thing you know, my office is just littered with Kit Kat wrappers. So yeah, that didn't work out so well for me.
Love me some Kit Kat, so I can't buy it, or I will eat it. Ben, we are recording this on Thursday, October 18th, with the Wisconsin Supreme Court now majority Democrat. That seems to have emboldened the anti-school choice crowd in the state, to the point where they filed a lawsuit accusing the state's voucher programs of harming public schools across Wisconsin. School choice advocates vow to fight for the program. Bring us up to speed on this fight, Ben.
You are exactly right to say that this is a lawsuit that is born out of Janet Protasewicz's election victory last spring. There is a long list of things that liberals, Democrats, progressives, whichever label you want to put on them in Wisconsin, they have a long list of grievances that go back a decade or more that they've not been able to get changed at the legislative level, that they can't get changed through local referenda. But now that they have a new liberal majority Supreme Court, they think they finally have the avenue to make all of these changes that they've been spoiling for. We've spent a lot of time over at the Center Square, a lot of time here on Wisconsin in Focus, talking about redistricting. And there will be more stories filed on that for next week's podcast. I promise you that, as well as abortion. But school choice has been one of the things that Democrats in Wisconsin, liberals, progressives, the state's teachers union has hated for decades. Wisconsin, one of the first states to go ahead with parental choice programs that allow parents in Milwaukee and Racine, and then parents of disabled students, and now a growing number of parents statewide to opt their children out of traditional public schools. So you're exactly right to frame this as a direct result of what happened when the liberals took control of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Part of the difficulty of talking about this story is the man who is driving this lawsuit, Kirk Bangstad, is the owner of the Minocqua Brewing Company. He is also a dyed-in-the-wool progressive who's a failed candidate for several offices, who wants to use his money to try and enforce what he sees as the proper role of government. This is a guy who filed lawsuits or was looking for plaintiffs back in 2021 to sue to reclose Wisconsin public schools to enforce mask mandates. This is a guy that has had his back and forth fights with the city of Minocqua over everything from fencing to politics. And so it's, while there is a much broader conversation about school choice and public funding, some of this is Kirk Bangstad really is one of these guys that is willing to lawyer up and go and find plaintiffs and try and take this case to the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
So how are school choice advocates responding then to this challenge?
The challenge is really based on the Wisconsin Constitution. And again, there's a whole wrinkle there of why are these now based on Wisconsin constitutional claims as opposed to federal constitution claims? And the simple answer is that Wisconsin has a liberal majority court. The U.S. Supreme Court is conservative majority. And so there's this thought to use state courts to get away from the U.S. federal court. This is why the redistricting challenge in Wisconsin is based on a state Supreme Court guarantee, why the challenge to abortion in Wisconsin is based on a state constitutional guarantee. And so this is based on a state constitutional guarantee, the Uniform Taxation Clause in the Wisconsin Constitution public purpose requirement. And it essentially says you can't do multiple things at once and everybody has to pay the same amount of taxes. School choice supporters say that this is clearly political, and this is only intended to send 50,000 plus kids back to failing public schools. and or send the money back. And that's really where the rub is.
And these 50,000 students, aren't they largely low-income students whose parents wouldn't have an option to send them to another school outside of their local public school without these programs?
Exactly. That you hear from opponents of school choice. And we've heard this argument for years, and I'm sure you hear this in other states as well. But it is this idea that somehow by providing kids with a voucher to go to a private school or a charter school or another school that's not their traditional neighborhood school, that is taking money away from black and brown children who are stuck largely in schools in Milwaukee and Racine and Kenosha and parts of Madison and Green Bay and all of these other places. And I can't remember if it was the Institute for Reforming Government or the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, School Choice Wisconsin, all of which are ready to fight this case all the way through. But they point out that the majority of kids who take advantage of school choice are kids from Milwaukee and Racine and parts of Madison, where their schools just aren't doing the job of educating these kids. And we talked, what was it, last week before, about the test score numbers that show 60% of kids across the state of Wisconsin cannot read or write at grade level. Well, those are the statewide numbers. That includes the affluent suburban schools. When you get down to an individual school district level, or worse, individual school level, you're talking in Milwaukee, some schools where there's single digit numbers of kids who are proficient, that 90-something% of kids in those schools cannot read or write at grade level. And the argument from these school choice groups is if you end school choice, you're simply going to move those kids back to a school district that has been failing them for years. This is why school choice is so very popular in many of these districts. But this comes down to money. And public schools in Wisconsin, like public schools across the rest of the country, are paid for by butts in seats. And the heart of the argument from Bangstad and Wisconsin's state superintendent of schools is that by allowing kids to go to a choice school, that means one less butt in a seat in a traditional public school. And there's then that much less money for that traditional public school. And this is, at the end of the day, sadly, not about reading, writing, and math and making sure that young men and women are prepared when they graduate high school. This is, sadly, a fight about money. And can public schools in the state get more money?
Ben, at thecentersquare.com, we do cover all 50 states, and we have been seeing school choice debates in many of these states across the country. But in the vast majority of cases, states are expanding school choice options. Wisconsin is the only one that comes to front of mind to me where they're looking to scale it back. Final closing thoughts on what's next.
Well, we had an expansion of school choice funding at the same time that we had an expansion of public school funding back in the spring, the earlier this year with the state budget. But again, you don't want to say this and sound as if you are, condemning public schools. But after covering the legislature for the better part of 20 years, they always want more. Enough is never enough. And each increase is just, well, if we could just get more, then maybe we would. And that's where they are. And again, you're right. Whereas other states are expanding, Democrats, progressives, liberals, whatever label you want to use, see this new liberal majority Wisconsin Supreme Court as their key to undoing everything. Look, right to work may be up. Act 10, which limited what public school teachers unions could bargain for, that could be up. Concealed carry could be up. Voter ID could be up. There is going to be a flood of lawsuits to the Wisconsin Supreme Court to try and get done what Democrats couldn't get done for the legislature or through the legislature for the past 10 years. And you have Democrats who don't like school choice, so you're going to have a lawsuit that challenges school choice here in Wisconsin.
Well, thank you as always for your insight into this very important issue, Ben, but that is all the time we have. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Ben Yount, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe. Thank you for listening.